If you enjoy this video, consider supporting us on Patreon for just $5 a month. Click on the card in the upper right-hand corner for more information. Hey, Julian from the future here. Don't mind the audio quality for this intro section. I accidentally didn't press record on my audio, so rather than re-record it, I just fixed it up as best as I could. Hey guys, this is Julian of Julian Gray Media, and in today's video, we're going to take a look inside the project of my brand new remix on Anjunabeats. This one is for the incredible, legendary Gabriel Dresden. A little backstory on this: I've just been friends with Dave for a little while now. We've exchanged a lot of music, had a lot of conversations throughout this quarantine period. He's been a bit of a mentor for me as far as, someone who's been in the game for so long. It's been really interesting having these conversations. When they were planning the Remedy remix album, that's the album you see on Anjunabeats, the Pine Cone, everyone knows about it. They were looking for remixers, and I had the honor of being one of the selected artists. So this remix actually came out a few months ago as a single along with the Simon Doty remix. If you want to check out the original release, I'll put the link in the upper right-hand corner. But it actually came out a second time as part of the entire Remedy album. That's why we're doing this video now instead of, 4 months ago or what have you. If you haven't already, go and check out both of those releases. The Remedy remixed album is incredible. There's a ton of incredible remixes on it, and I'm just honored to be a part of it. So without any further ado, let's hop into Ableton. I'll give you a rundown on the track, and I hope you enjoy. Let's go ahead and start at the top here. First thing I want to address is this right here. This is what I consider an arrangement channel. This is something I do in every track, and I think it's something that a lot of newer producers could benefit from doing. A lot of times producers, when they're starting out in live, they'll go and they'll add a bunch of locators. Like, this is our drop, this is our breakdown. And what this does, if I scroll down here and you see, you just have a lot of vertical lines through your project file. It gets very cumbersome to see, and it really takes away from the optics of this horizontal layout. If you start to get too many of these, it becomes very cumbersome to look at, and it's hard to identify what each of these are. Of course, you could label them. This could be your breakdown, or this could be your verse. I don't know, but it becomes really cumbersome to look at, and it's not immediately clear what this is when you're looking at it from first glance. So what I like to do is actually use this method I came up with a few years ago and actually just put a MIDI clip, 2 MIDI clips on the top of the track. You can actually do more if you need to describe anything. But what I do is I put these MIDI clips at the top. Generally, I call this an arrangement channel. I don't know if that's even spelled correctly, but you get the gist. And what I do is it's basically a blank MIDI clip. There's nothing actually, or a blank MIDI channel. There's nothing actually in the channel strip. There's no instrument or any sort of processing at all. And all I do is actually just create clips to identify visually what each section of the track is. So instead of doing a locator here for an intro, and then 8 bars later do another locator for verse, and then 16 later one for breakdown, I like to do this with MIDI clips. And there's a lot of advantages to this. If you have a clip here, I can just click on it, click on the top bar. I can hit Command L or Control L on Windows, and I can just loop that section over and over. So if I want to work on my verse, it's easier to do that than highlight Command L, or even drag this loop region around. And also, if you're trying to record something in, you can highlight the section, punch in, punch out, so that you can record only for that verse part or what have you. That's one benefit here, and I'm sure you can see optically this is much easier to follow than a bunch of vertical lines. So I always like to do this in every track. And it also helps you, newer producers out there, to really identify problems in your arrangement. So like a lot of times producers have like sections that are too short or too long for your verse versus your drop contrast. You don't want your drop to be 5 times longer than your verse. You don't want your verse, especially don't want your verse or breakdown to be exceptionally long. And this allows you to visually and optically see, okay, this is 16 bars, this might be a little bit too long. If I need to do a radio edit or an extended version or an instrumental version, what have you, I have a different alternate version of the song. I always like to do it in the same project file, just so that we can, easily make mix adjustments without having to bounce back and forth between two separate project files. I used to do that back in 2013, 2014, where I'd have a radio edit and an instrumental and a what have you version, and they were all different separate project files. So I don't like doing that anymore. I like to just toss it in the arrangement. When I'm ready to export, I just click on the version I want to export. I do Command L, and then I can export that version just by exporting the loop region. There's other stuff you can do with this too, like if you want to, add in another MIDI clip for notes or something like that, where wherever you see the clip is something you have to address. You can also do that and label the clips. This is just a technique that I use that I think is something that could benefit a lot of newer producers that I haven't really seen anyone else do this, and I think it's really useful. You can also just group these and call it like an arrangement. But yeah, so that's the arrangement up here. If you're ever wondering what you see up here, I wanted to address this because a lot of people wonder and ask me in my other fixture project videos, like, why do you do that? And I think that this is a very clear way optically to see your arrangement in full. Enough talking about that. Let's go ahead and hop into the actual song itself. So to start things off, let's go ahead and look at the core element, which I would say is that main pluck melody thing. Here we go. So I'm just gonna play it from here. This is actually the bass part of it. Super cool, bouncy. I can give you a quick look at the patch as well. You guys have probably seen my other videos on sound design. Most of my sound design is pretty rudimentary, just a series of saw waves with a varying level of unison and a filter, basically. I'm automating the filter cutoff with, I believe it's an LFO doing an envelope at a dotted eighth note. There's a macro controlling the detune for those tenser moments. Also the cutoff. Let's create those really cool rising sections. There's also a bit of FM on here. I use a second dial to control the FM. That's what creates that cool, almost new harmonic to that bass sound right towards the end of the phrase here. It almost sounds like you add a different note in there, but it's actually just FM, the oscillator A modulating from oscillator B at a certain rate to create that really cool new harmonic. There's a lot of automation here. I'm not going to go through everything in this video, but if you pause and you take a look, you can actually see everything I've done. And that's like the core bass sound. There's some filter automation and stuff for making sections smaller. One thing I like to proclaim to my students when we're having our sessions, I do one-on-one sessions with mentees all the time, is the importance of contrast in between sections. So like if you have a verse section and a breakdown section, or a breakdown section and a drop section, you're going to want to contrast those two sections. And a good way to do that is just by low passing a section. So if we have this bass playing here, fully open, you have that full energy feeling, verse feeling, drop feeling, etc. But as soon as you start to remove some of that top end, some of that clarity and the punch, you start to push things back into the background a little bit more. I did a full video on emulating this forward and backward motion. You can click on the link to that in the upper right hand corner, but it might help you fully understand this a little bit more. You see how when we filter that same sound, it feels further away and more subtle, more low energy. And that's what I'm going for here. Yeah, so I like to apply a low pass filter on a lot of my elements as we hit the breakdown sections. But I think the main takeaway is the importance of contrast and making sure that your verse sections have more energy or feel more clear and more in your face than your breakdown sections. We have a few other examples of that where I add in more subtle elements in the breakdown right before the build up and right before the drop, just to make these sections feel a little bit softer and a little bit more subdued than in your face like the verses. See, we add the string in, kind kind of bring in the legato feeling. To create that slowed down feeling in like a breakdown section where you want to reduce the energy, you can switch from a very staccato rhythm to a very legato rhythm. And what that does is it creates this sense of slowing the pace down. Even if you're not slowing the tempo down, you're just drawing out the notes. Imagine like you're going to sleep. You're starting to drift a little bit. That's what legato does for you. So if you're trying to create a breakdown that feels smaller and more subdued, try to avoid using really staccato rhythms, at least in your core bass and chord sections. You might be able to put like a lead, like a counter melody or something like that with a really sharp staccato rhythm, but generally you want these sounds to be more floaty, more drifty, and that is, attributed to legato notes, holding out pads, long release times on maybe like a cutoff, like a choo, rather than like a choo. Maybe even some reverb can create that effect in breakdowns. We add this string section in. It's just Spitfire Labs, really awesome free VST from Spitfire, one of the best software instrument companies in the world, and it's totally free to pick up. I'm using Strings Ensemble from Labs. I have a little bit of reverb. I'll give you a quick look at these. I'm not going to go through these. We've done this in the past, and I've done it in other videos. So if you want to check those out, you can click on my previous Inside the Project videos. A lot of my sound design and stuff is relatively the same. So yeah, we have the string section. We add in a super saw towards the end of that section here. That's just a saw oscillator with some noise on it. Creates that cool like pseudo Juno 106 kind of sound. We have a filter kind of rising through slowly too. And that falls back on that idea I just described, where you want to slow things down. You want to make sure all your automation and stuff is kind of slower and more drifty than it is staccato in your breakdowns. We have a few other elements to this breakdown too. We have these guys. We have that traditional, like dead mouse, some chords, fifth up saw pad here with a little bit of filter motion to create that cool mid-tone. It's just the root and the fifth, roots down an octave. There's our MIDI for the lead. Lead's super simple too. We just have two sine waves, one's FMing the other. That creates that DX7 kind of FM bell that you're used to hearing in a lot of 80s music and synth pop. And that's a sound set that I really enjoy, and something that makes its way into a lot of my music. Songs like Static and that sort of thing have a huge 80s influence, and a lot of that is FM sine waves. A little bit of delay and reverb on this. Again, I'll give you a quick look. If you want, you can pause the screen. We have another pad here, which actually carries on through the beginning. Just to add a little bit of atmosphere to the intro. Not doing a whole lot, it's just a saw wave with a low pass on it. And every so often I open that filter up to bring in a little bit more energy. I'm trying to build up the tension here into the build up, so I'm opening that cutoff filter very gradually. And just cuts right off there, creates that really awesome feel. All right, and then as it gets to this part, we introduce that fifth bass back. Super filtered to start to kind of subdue it into the background, and as we bring in that as we bring in that high end, it's bringing the sound forward into the mix, and it feels like it's coming closer. Something is about to begin, and that's the feeling that you want to create in something like a build-up. Again, I used a lot of these techniques in my video on bringing something forward and backward. I already linked that in the upper right. So what this does is it really takes us from this really, legato, filtered section, and it really brings us into the drop by introducing the staccato rhythm with a filter over it. Okay, that's the core of the elements here. There's a few other stuff. There's the main lead, which I'm sure you'll be excited to see. But let's go ahead and take a look at this first. This is the big blang sound that you hear in the drop. Very similar to my pad I used in static. It's just 2 saw waves with a sub and a little bit of filter motion to slowly sweep down like bam. Kind of to emulate that Hans Zimmer like blang effect that you hear in like the movies. Also just a really tense note, similar to like what you would do in techno or acid. They use a lot of these big bass hits that linger. And I don't know, my time writing techno, I kind of pick that up and apply it to trance now. So we have the lead now. This is a really, really cool element, I think. I think it's one of my favorite parts of the song. So one technique I like to do in my music is to create these reverse fades. And what I do is I actually just grab the first note of the melody. I go ahead and put it on a new MIDI track. I'm just going to actually duplicate this, easy enough. And then I go ahead and isolate that first note. And then if I just play that first note, what I do is I make sure it has a lot of reverb. I'm going to disable the delay. And I freeze the note, so it ends up with this really long tail. Might take a moment because it's freezing the entire channel. But sometimes when you have a lead melody, it feels like it just kind of drops into the song. It doesn't feel like it's come from anywhere. It doesn't feel like there's anything leading into it. It just feels like the staccato lead is just hit and it had come from nowhere and it's going nowhere. So one solution I like to use to resolve that is this solution where I take the first note, isolate the first note with a bunch of reverb, and then we're going to flip it on its head so that it's reversed. And when you do that, you end up with a tail similar to this that we have in the track here. It insinuates, this coming forward of the melody. It feels like the melody is coming from somewhere. It's not just there automatically. And if I go ahead and I flatten this now, and then if we flip this around, if we hit reverse, and then we have ourselves a nice little fade. And then we can go ahead and drag it forward so it aligns up with our melody, and we end up with something like this. Now there's a little bit of crossover there we need to address. You see that first transient? That's the actual transient of the melody here. I just want to scrap that. If we hold Command or Control on your Windows computer, you can just drag this over and get rid of it, and then we can Command drag it over so that it aligns with our start of note. We end up with this. And you end up insinuating the melody before the melody comes in, and you end up with this really awesome fade effect that can create a nice introduction to your melody. You can do the same thing with vocals. It's very popular in vocals as well. If you wonder how I do those fades, that's how it's done. I don't do it in this particular song, but a lot of my music has those vocal fades, and you can do it to great effect on your vocals as well. So I'll give you a quick look at the patch for this synth. It's not anything too complicated, just this 4088 wavetable with a square wave. That's what's creating that really sharp kind of belly tone. We have an AM going on from A little bit of downsample, and again, the macro is controlling our cutoff. We have reverb, delay, a little bit of EQ, and yeah, that's that. There's also this layer of the lead here, which is just a saw wave and a square. So those two together This kind of adds a shininess to the square layer. Square waves have a very particular, specific sound to them, and I kind of want to lose a little bit of that by adding some saw harmonics in there, like this. We're creating that really sharp, choppy effect by automating the volume of each of these oscillators. We're actually not using the filter on that second sound. We're using the filter on the first one. Then we have a piano in the build-up section, which is that da-ding, 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 da-ding. Not too complicated, just an interesting triplet pattern on the build-up sections, which complements the drums really well. Creates this really cool tension and suspense doing the same pattern and a clap doing the same pattern, which is a nice complement to that piano. My signature 80s tom. Doo-doo. Really, really awesome, Phil Collins-esque drum sound. Then we have a 909 doing a roll here. Really self-explanatory stuff. Super tense. We have a riser as well, which is a single note, but it's actually being automated within Serum. Pitch automation here. I guess it's actually within the MIDI clip. We're doing a pitch bend up. And there's a little bit of pan on it to create some stereo image, reverb, compressor, high pass, the usual. We have another riser doing that same pattern again. Chorus. And then we have a little bit of detune and coarse pitch automation. Then the reverb actually on this guy is getting automated too, which is interesting to mention. You can use reverb to create a sense of coming forward and backward as well. By drowning something in reverb, you kind of push it back in the mix. It's kind of a misconception. When it's super dry, it feels in your face. You can hear it kind of being pushed back, pushed outwards. And then I kind of dry it out towards the end, so it feels like it's going really far and then pulling back in. And that's another way to create contrast in your build-up sections. There's a few more elements here. There's a lot of stuff in the bass, and then there's the vocals. But let's go ahead and take a look at this guy. This is just a vocal pad that I've stretched and basically grabbed one frame of and kind of linger on it. I guess it's a little bit too long to be called a frame, but it's just one little, 4-beat section. Automate the transpose up 5 semitones. And I always try to make my musical changes a different color from my regular sections. So like if I have a very obvious musical change, I'll list it with a different color. So as you can see, this is the original note. If I change the automation or if I transpose a clip, I want to make sure that this is colored differently so that I can recall this quickly. So if I'm writing a song and I want to recall that 5 semitones up note, I can just go ahead and, I see the pink, I know I can just grab the pink and run with that clip. Same thing with MIDI as well. As you can see, I've done this on here. Whenever I change notes, I change the color of the clip so that I can recall it easily. So if I solo these, da, da. So if I'm building the progression and I want to just recall the note, I can just grab the da or the da very quickly, and then that way it makes my progressions really modular. I can make adjustments to the progression outside of taking the whole clip and making small changes to it. If I want to change the chord from an A to an E, it's not difficult for me to do that just by seeing vertically. This chord right here is an A and this is an E. It's not, but you get what I'm saying. It allows me to build these what I consider modular chord progressions so that I know exactly what note is playing at any given time, and that means I can recall the notes. It's really really obvious in things like techno when you want to do like a little turnaround note and you linger on one note for a majority of the song and then you switch notes. You can make that note a different color so it's very visually and optically easy to see, so you can change to it quickly without having to draw in new MIDI every time. So as you can see, whenever I do a big musical change, like if I switch note pattern, if I switch chord, if I switch even rhythm, I want to change that to a different color so that I can recall that section quickly without having to dig around through a channel and try to find it again. I even do it for things like noise. If I have automation that goes up and down, I use a different color than when it's just straight down or what have you. So yeah, so we have this pad here. There's also a section here. This is do. Which is just a little vocal clip that I transpose in a similar way. Transpose these a lot, actually. Creates that cool, like, vocally atmospheric sound. Then we have a snare. It hits on the kick every time, creates that big progressive feeling in the the latter part of each drop. And then let's go ahead and take a look at the vocals. So we got these. I have B kind of throughout to create this floor of vocal. You can kind of hear that. It blends into the background. It feels more like a support element than an actual, vocal itself. And then towards the end of each, I go towards a be there for you. But it's still got the same processing as these, background vocal elements, so it feels like part of the pad and not like a foreground vocal like these guys. One of the keys to vocals, I think, is to really make sure that they stick out in the mix. So make sure that your vocals are really loud. It has a lot of top end on them. Don't use too much reverb and delay. That's a huge mistake to make. It really clouds up your vocals and it makes it feel like it's in the background and buried and not up in the front. Not too much going on here, just a little reverb and delay. And then I have harmonies that I sang, which is this guy. I mentioned in my Eventide EP commentary that I always like to feature a little bit of my vocals in every song just to kind of give it, a little bit of my character. It's the one instrument that you have that nobody else has to use, your own voice. So I always like to feature a little bit of my stuff in there. If not top lining the song, I always try to feature a little bit of my voice in there. And the only thing left to look at, I think, is the drop bass, which we already kind of looked at, which is this guy. Here's the sound design for it. Just a saw wave up 3 octaves, and then a pulse width mod shape as well, with a little bit of cutoff modulation on both. Faturator gives it that really nice crunch. Forgot to mention, here is the drums that I use. The kick is a layer of 3 different kicks. We have a mid kick, we have a sub kick, and then we have a kick kind of more for a transient. And those 3 together sound like this. Really nice. We have a reverse kick into kick in the start of every section. So we end up with this. Whoomp. And it feels really nice. Rides over the ends of each phrase. Very like Wolfgang Gartner. And then we have some hi-hats in there as well. Very straightforward stuff. Just shuffled velocity hi-hat rhythm with a little bit of panning, a little bit of reverb, creates that really cool stereo depth on the hats. And we have, a standard open hat just kind of chugging along to create that groove as well. Little baby clap. Short and sweet. Matt Lang samples. Matt is a good friend and incredible samples you should go pick up all of his stuff. Sidechain to the kick just to create a little bit more transient shaping. And yeah, that's essentially the Will I Change remix. Awesome, guys. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a like. If you didn't, give it a dislike. Let me know why in the comment section below. If you have any ideas for future videos, put them down in the comments as well. And if you did enjoy this video, make sure to subscribe for future videos. Go check me out on Patreon if you want early access to videos, a lot of awesome perks, including our Discord roles and monthly Fix Your Project streams. And make sure to check out the Discord too, because, you know, it's a pretty cool community. I'm Julian of Julian Gray Media, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.